Distinguished guests, partners, investors, project sponsors, and colleagues, welcome. Welcome to this joint webinar co-hosted by NEXI, Nippon Export and Investment Insurance, and ATI, the African Trade Insurance Agency. My name is Annabelle Buzingo. I'm a senior underwriter at ATI and a member also of the Japanese desk within ATI. I have the extreme pleasure to be your moderator today during this session. This webinar is featured as a side event of the 8th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, otherwise known as TICAD 8, which will be held over this coming weekend in Tunis. Our webinar today will explore how to catalyze Japanese investments in African business and African green growth. It's a wide and very important subject that we will be discussing today at a time where Africa and the world have faced a series of overlapping crises, including the prolonged impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, rising inflation, and current geopolitical tensions between Russia and Ukraine, which have ramifications all over the world. So these challenges have threatened to erode many of the development gains achieved in recent years on the African continent. And it is extremely concerning given that the African continent was witnessing a remarkable progress in economic growth and human development in recent years. So to ensure it recovers post-COVID, Africa will need to attract more private investors who can join forces with local partners in order to create added value and thus initiate inclusive and sustainable growth. So in this context, the continent will need much more investment from Japan. So the question now is, how do we do that? How do we boost Japanese investment in the private sector, the energy sector, telecom, healthcare, agriculture sectors, etc.? So these are some of the questions that we will address in this webinar today with our panelists. Today's webinar will be broken down into two parts. In the first part, we will focus on sustainability and supporting the African Green Growth Strategy. In the second part, we will discuss the cooperation between ATI and NEXI, how both organizations came together to further support Japanese investment in Africa. And we will showcase what this entails with a practical transaction case study. So I will now pause here and give the floor to my fellow NEXI colleague, Yuchihiro Akita, who will give his opening remarks. Good afternoon, Yuchihiro.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. Distinguished guests and all the audience, good afternoon and good evening to you. Welcome to the webinar. I'm Yuichiro Akita, General Manager, International Strategic Policy at NEXI. I have been working with my friends of ATI to prepare for this webinar. The webinar is regarded as one of the official side events for TICAD 8 to be held on this weekend. We thank for Japanese government, embassies, and the agency, namely JETRO, to support for our ranges of activities related to TICAD 8. We also thank ATI and also my colleagues to prepare for this event. Without their support, actually, we could not host the webinar today. And lastly, but not least, we thank the audience. Most will be from Africa and Japan. We sincerely hope that the webinar could help your understanding how ATI-NEXI partnership will support Japanese companies' African investment, as well as how we can contribute for the people in Africa and the sustainable development, including green growth. Now let's move to the first session. Over to you, Annabelle.
Thank you, Yuchihiro. If I'm not mistaken, I believe you're joining us from Cairo today, right? Well, before we kick off our first section, let us hear from our audience first and see where they are joining us from. So we want to hear now from you. So we'll start with a quick poll. Audience, please, if you could tell us where you are in the world. Let us find out some of the answers now. I think we have a number of participants on the line today, and I'm sure people are tuning in from all over the world. I see Kenya, where I am located as well myself. Hello, Japan, of course. We have Benin on the line. This is great. Hi, Benin. I'm guessing it should be Cotonou, Egypt. I myself, I'm in Nairobi, Kenya, where the sun has refused to come out today. Let's see if you have some other countries in the world that are represented today. Indonesia, wow, Jakarta, welcome. Indonesia on the line. It's fantastic. People have tuned in from all over the world. Or Malawi, Burundi, close to home. This is home for me. Amahoro, karibu cyane. You have the USA as well. France, bienvenue. Jeddah as well. Tanzania, karibu. Uganda. Seems we have, it's fantastic. People have tuned in from all over the world. We have, Europe, Asia, Africa, the USA. I mean, some of you are listening in while having breakfast, while others will wind up to bed in a couple of hours. So this is fantastic. Hello, Toronto. So we have the six as well represented. This is fantastic. I mean, the number of participants in this webinar and the fact that so many countries are represented today just goes to show how important this webinar topic is to so many of us. And we are grateful that you are joining us today. So without further ado, let's just jump right in and move to our first session, supporting African green growth. So this first session is very interesting, I find, because it has now become clear that for the African continent to develop resilient economies and recover post-pandemic, we need to fuel sustainable development, because many of the development decisions taken today on infrastructure, energy system, food production will have long-term consequences. So what does a green recovery look like? How do we crowd in the financing that is needed to put in new renewable energy projects or sustainable water infrastructure? How can Japanese investors contribute to the green and the blue economies? So these are some of the questions that our panelists will try to answer in their presentations. Our panelists for these sessions are Mr. Kei Kawahara, Mr. Yoji Akiyama, and Mr. Obi Banda. For our audience, we want this webinar to be interactive, so there will be a live Q&A after the presentations. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box that is on the right hand of your screen. So kicking off with our first presentation entitled Catalyzing Investment Opportunities Toward African Green Growth and How Japanese Could Contribute is Mr. Kei Kawahara. Mr. Kei Kawahara is the Director of Trade Finance Division in the Trade and Economy Cooperation Bureau of the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI. Positions he has held in his over 20 years public service at the ministry includes special advisors to the parliamentary vice minister, and most recently, Director of Energy and Environment Innovation Strategy Office. He has also had leadership experience in the ECA community with his secondment to NEXI from 2018 to 2021 as head of Paris office and chief representative for Europe, Africa, Middle East, CIS countries, and Russia. So Mr. Kawahara, it's a pleasure to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Annabelle, and good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kei Kawahara. As Annabelle kindly introduced, I am the Director of Trade Finance Division in Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, which is the guardian authority, guardian ministry of NEXI. Also, I used to be seconded to NEXI to work as the head of NEXI Paris office from 2018 until last summer. As the NEXI Paris office covers African region, I visited Africa many times. I clearly remember the first time when I visited ATI in Nairobi. It was October 25th, 2018, and it was a good kickoff meeting to strengthen our relationship. So it is my great pleasure to have a chance to join this ATI NEXI webinar and make a presentation about, as you can see on this page, catalyzing investment opportunities towards African green growth and how Japan can contribute. So next slide, please. Now I would like to start with the importance of green growth. In Japan, in June 2021, the Japanese government formulated the green growth strategy. It upholds high goals for each of its 14 priority fields and is now being implemented. Regarding Africa, there is high potential of renewable energy resources, which I will talk on the next slide. Also, Africa could be seriously affected by climate change. So we believe it is crucial to see climate change as an opportunity for growth and to promote green growth strategy. Next page, please. Okay, we are sure that Africa has a huge renewable energy potential. The potential capacity of renewable energy, such as solar, wind power, and geothermal energy is huge. By 2030, investment opportunities for renewable energy in Africa is assumed to surpass those in the Middle East, as you can see on the table below. And the economic impacts will be very large. It is estimated that solar wind power industries will employ 250,000 people directly and 160,000 people indirectly in Africa by 2030. Next page, please. Okay. Also, I would like to reiterate the importance and potential of transition areas. It is important to promote the transition of existing industries such as mining and resource industries, agriculture, and manufacturing in Africa. In addition, IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency, forecasts that Africa has the highest potential for producing and supplying green hydrogen by 2050. This new industry will contribute not only to sustainable economic growth in Africa, but also to the realization of global carbon neutrality. And next page, please. Okay, now let me focus on how Japan contributes to renewable energy. Opportunities of renewable energy IPP projects are gradually expanding. So as you can see on the tables below, Japanese companies are actively working on bid participation. Also, they are utilizing public financial support from NEXI and JBIC. We regard NEXI and JBIC as indispensable partners to promote business overseas, including Africa. Okay, next page, please. In addition, Japan will contribute to energy transition as well. In North Africa, more than 80% of power is generated by gas-fired power plants. In these areas, Japanese companies participate in the form of investment and supply of main equipment, such as gas turbines. Also, the Japanese government recognizes that a diverse and realistic energy transition that utilizes gas-fired power is essential. So we, Japanese government, is ready and willing to contribute to African energy transition. Next page, please. Okay, here I would like to focus on the direction of Japan's contribution after TICAD 8. Please remember 3 with. The first one is with Africa. Japan will be the best partner with consideration to the circumstances faced by each country in Africa. And second, with international partners. Japan will align with international institutions and partner countries. And the third one is with private partners. Japan will focus on private sector investment and innovation to promote projects in the public and private sectors. Bearing these 3 with in mind, we will promote 3 themes. The first one is investment in renewable energy. The second one is business development for adaptation. And the third one is aligning with African countries and relevant partners. This direction is a significant part of Prime Minister Kishida's initiative. So everyone, please pay full attention to Prime Minister's speech on Saturday, August 27th. And next page, please. Last but not least, I would like to touch upon the revision of the Trade and Investment Insurance Act. This act articulates the structure and functions of NEXI. We have revised this act this spring, taking into consideration 3 key points. The first one is COVID response. The second one is improvement of supply chain resilience. And the third one is global cooperation. This revision came into effect on July 1st. Okay, I have 3 minutes left, so I will explain one by one. Regarding the first point, COVID response, we have expanded the coverage of political risk events to include infectious diseases under trade insurance products. And the second one is regarding the second point, improvement of supply chain resilience. We have included the loss incurred by Japanese companies due to damage to their indirect investees. The last one, the last one is actions to intensify global cooperation. We have added to NEXI the function of equity investment in multilateral financial institutions. I would like to reiterate the importance of this revision, this part, because this exactly enables NEXI to be a shareholder of ATI. I stop here. This is all of my presentation, and I sincerely hope that the partnership between ATI and NEXI will be further strengthened by this MOU and upcoming equity investment, and that it will be a trigger to create further tangible outcomes in Africa. And last but not least, we Japanese government commit to strengthen the win-win relationship for both Africa and Japan. Thank you for your kind attention, and asante.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation indeed, Mr. Kawahara. And we also at ATI value this partnership that we have with NEXI. So thank you very much for your time. As I know you have a flight to catch to Tunis right now. So have a safe trip and all the best during TCAD's AIDS. So thank you very much. Moving on to our second presenter of the day, Mr. Yoji Akiyama, who is the Chief Manager of Solution Service Group, Structured and Trade Finance Insurance Division at NEXI. Before working for NEXI, he was manager of Infrastructure Advisory Team of Ernst & Young Strategy and Consulting, serving as financial advisor for the infrastructure sector. He also has experience in Japanese financial institutions and government of Japan. Mr. Akiyama, in his presentation, will tell us more about NEXI's initiatives contributing to green growth. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Akiyama. Over to you.
Thank you, Annabelle. Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yoji Akiyama. I'm a Chief Manager of a Solution Service Group of Structured and Trade Finance Insurance Departments. I would like to present the outline of our agency, NEXI, and also how NEXI can contribute to green growth. Next page, please. Thank you. Let me share a big picture on our agency. NEXI is a Japanese government-owned public insurance arm, so-called Export Credit Agency of Japan, ECA. Our goal is to support multiple beneficiaries such as host government, project developers, exporters, and finance providers. Yes, next page, please. Thank you. We have mainly three product lines from top to the bottom: export insurance, investment insurance, and also loan insurance. This loan insurance, which offer risk cover for finance, is what I want to present today. I would like to, I think this product will suitable for challenge to green growth in Africa. Next page, please. Blue one is buyer's credit insurance called buyer's credit, and orange one is overseas anti-loan insurance called OULI. This is our two loan insurance package. I would like to show you the outline of each product in the next page. Next page, please. Thank you. This is the outline of buyer's credit insurance. This is a tied insurance scheme where Japanese exporters export goods and services to the foreign government and companies, and then commercial lenders provide loan to such buyers and actually cover such finance with insurance. The coverage is 100% for PLI, political risks, and 95% for CLI, commercial risk. Finance condition is subject to OECD arrangement. Okay, next page, please. Thank you. This is the OULI outline, untied insurance scheme. This is very flexible insurance, but Japan interest is required for each transaction, such as equity injection by a Japanese company or offtake to Japan. offtake of natural resources to Japan. JI is precondition to application for OULI. In addition to these conventional loan insurance products, buyer's credit and OULI, as the agenda of this webinar, approaching and accelerating financial solution to green growth, I would like to share our two recent launched insurance scheme. The first one is a lead initiative and also loan insurance for green growth, for green innovation. Next page, please. Yeah, thank you. This is a lead initiative. This initiative is expanded version of OULI. The unique feature of this program is what we can offer our insurance to the project and borrower, which satisfied at least either one of the four leading elements, L, E, A, and D. L is for leading technologies and businesses, which is the aspect of new business, new technologies, which will lead to business expansion of Japanese company. E is for environmental energy, such as renewable projects. A is for alliance, for example, alliance with the foreign government, MDBs, and also other institutions is the best case for lead initiative. For example, alliance with the ATI is, of course, the best example for lead initiative. The last element is D. D is for development. For example, the project which contribute to social issues in the host country, such as tackling to COVID-19, is eligible for lead initiative. Lead initiative makes us to support more wider range of the projects and clients. For example, in the case of new technology projects such as hydrogen, even though there are no Japanese equity injection or offtake to Japan, if this project meets the requirement of leading technologies, we can offer our insurance. Next page, please. The second newly launched product is the loan insurance for green innovation. This offers robust commercial risk coverage to the client's project. The renewables and energy conservation and the new technologies are eligible for this program. The coverage ratio is 100% for PLI and 97.5% for CLI. We believe this will push to facilitate the project for green growth. So next page, please. This shows our contribution to green growth all over the world as of today. Next is underwrites $1.9 billion for renewables such as solar, geothermal, and wind, and we will keep expand our contribution, of course. Next page, please. Thank you. This is my last page in my presentation. I would like to show our approach to green growth in Africa. We think the challenge to green growth is how the finance liquidity is secure. For this challenge, we would like to, number one, offer sufficient risk cover. Number two, mobilizing variety of investors. Then number three, providing liquidity to green growth market. For achieving this, we use our various insurance schemes such as lead initiative, loan insurance for green innovation, and also infrastructure fund cover. Nexi can offer insurance cover not only corporate clients, but also infrastructure fund, which have strong presence in the green growth market these days. We believe this can be one of the solutions to facilitate green growth, and of course in Africa. I hope we can cooperate with ATI and also here audience clients for challenging to green growth in Africa. Yes, thank you. This is all my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Akiyama, for this detailed presentation. I mean, this lead initiative is very encouraging, I think, and it's also great to see how ECAs like Nexi walk the talk by promoting green growth and greener economies. So it's actually quite interesting. I mean, this is also the case for DFIs such as ATI, who have come up with instruments and initiatives promoting clean and sustainable energy projects. So this will be covered more in detail now by my colleague and friend, Obibanda. Mr. Banda is an innovative insurer with over 7 years experience across general political risk and trade credit insurance, as well as project management. OB has led or actively participated in the structuring and negotiation of complex transactions in multiple countries on the African continent. Since joining ATI in 2018, OB has managed several renewable energy sector initiatives and the wider renewable energy portfolio of ATI, leading the rollout of initiatives that since 2020 have supported landmark power projects in Burundi, Kenya, and Malawi, enabling over $150 million in total project financing. The initiatives OB currently manages within ATI include the Regional Liquidity Support Facility, RLSF, the African Energy Guarantee Facility, AEGF, and the Transparency Tool. So good afternoon, OB. Thank you for being with us. The microphone is now yours.
Sure. Thank you so much, Annabelle. And thank you so much to everyone that has made time to join today's session. We really hope that by the end of this, you have a better understanding of what we are trying to do and the various areas we're looking to grow into. So I have a few slides with me to run you over the various initiatives that ATI is a part of and some that ATI has led in the last few years. A lot of the work that we do is very similar to what my colleague from Nexi has presented on. Of course, the difference with ATI is that our mandate is uniquely on the African continent. Before I go into detail in terms of what we do, I think looking at the very first few minutes of this session, when Annabelle was kind enough to ask you all to share where you are joining us from, there's people here from the USA, I think from Canada, from Asia, from Africa. And perhaps before I go into the various initiatives that we have as ATI, it might be useful for you to understand who we are as an organization. We are one of the largest DFIs on the African continent, and we've been rated A stable by S&P and Moody's for the last 10 plus years. Within African member states, we are what we call a preferred creditor. What that means is that African member countries that have joined ATI, as of today, there are 20 across East, Southern, Central, and West Africa. And within those countries, we're recognized as a preferred creditor. In the event of a default by the government within that nation, they recognize that transactions that are supported by ATI or those that have benefited from some form of political risk insurance should be treated in a preferential manner in handling those particular defaults. And as I run through the various initiatives that we have, you will get to better appreciate why that is important in our business model. In terms of the products that we provide, they fall into two categories. One is political risk insurance. By political risk insurance, you're covering perils such as confiscation, such as war and civil disturbance, currency inconvertibility, or breach of contract, where you enter into contracts with various government entities. For commercial risks, you're looking at the risks of bankruptcy, refusal to pay, the kind of commercial risk you entail or you go into when you sign a contract with a private off-taker or a private counterparty on various transactions. The products that we offer cut across various sectors, from energy to infrastructure to water projects to non-payment by borrowers on commercial facilities. So we can offer support in respect of green growth, which will be the focus of my presentation, but we can also do that beyond that sector into other areas. And I thought that would be useful for all those attending to appreciate before we go into the specific case studies we have today. In terms of what ATI has been doing to contribute towards green growth, as of today, nearly 2/3 of people on the African continent do not have access to clean and reliable electricity. That's a big social, economic, and humanitarian challenge. We realize that as an institution, ATI has been very impactful across various sectors, across various countries. And by specializing, by applying a bit more resources, by encouraging more of our partners to come on board to set up products that can help encourage additional investors into the power sector, we believe we can have an impactful difference in ensuring that the development that is coming to the African continent is done in a sustainable manner, and it is done in a manner that is environmentally friendly and has a little impact on the livelihoods, the health, and is able to do so in a manner that is cost effective as well. ATI is doing that in the energy sector through three key initiatives. One is the African Energy Guarantee Facility. Two is a Regional Liquidity Support Facility. And lastly, we have the Transparency Tool. About the African Energy Guarantee Facility, it was set up about 4 to 5 years ago, working closely with the European Investment Bank, Munich Re, and more recently we were joined by KfW Development Bank. In terms of how AEGF works, it's in a relatively simple manner. Whenever an investor is looking to invest into a power project across the African continent, one of the risks they'll be concerned with is that of political risk. They'll be concerned that their project might be confiscated. They'll be concerned that they'll receive payments in local currency, which is typically how most of these contracts are structured. And there'll be a worry about whether or not they can externalize those payments to pay off dividends or to settle debt facilities that procured in their countries of origin. We can cover such political risks both for the. What's key for us to support those particular projects is that they contribute towards the attainment of SDG number 7, which is sustainable energy for all. As of today, we are very proud to have supported 2 transactions already under this facility. The very first one was a solar IPP in Kenya for about 40 megawatts, and the second one, which we closed in the last few weeks, is a 5 megawatt hydro project in Zimbabwe. The next initiative that we have is the Regional Liquidity Support Facility, RLSF. RLSF is a joint venture between ATI, KfW, and NORAD. NORAD became one of our key partners in that initiative when they came on board earlier this year. In terms of how RLSF works, it looks to address one key market gap, and that is the risk of delayed payments by state-owned power utilities. Across most African countries, independent power producers will enter into contracts with state-owned utilities. Most state-owned utilities do make payments, but there's always a concern about whether those payments will be made in time and what will happen in the event of a payment delay. And that's the risk that RLSF is looking to address. How we do that is by stepping in on behalf of the government by providing what is called buyer payment security. We do that by making available to the lenders or to the project itself a revolving liquidity instrument. Under phase 1, that was via a letter of credit issued by a bank, and then that bank benefits from collateral being provided by ATI and our donor partners. In terms of how RLSF is structured, we make use of the cash collateral that has been provided by KfW and NORAD. Thereafter, under phase 1, we provide that collateral for the benefit of the bank, and the bank issues the LCs for the benefit of the project. Why this is important is that if institutions such as ATI, and we are aware that our colleagues at the World Bank and AFDB provide similar solutions, if neither one of us steps in, that requirement, that burden will lie on the government. Now, providing cash collateral might seem relatively small, but doing so for multiple projects at the same time in a given country can be very, very expensive. And we hope by providing this solution on behalf of the governments, we can lessen that burden and thereafter encourage more projects to reach financial close. RLSF is quite unique in that it's a revolving guarantee, so you can have drawdowns at any given point, and thereafter we can replenish the guarantee that we provided. It's structured to benefit mainly smaller projects of up to 50 megawatts. Following recent changes, we can look at projects of up to 100 megawatts, and on a case-by-case basis, we can look at larger transactions as well. A good case study of the impact RLSF has had is in Malawi, where as of today, we've supported 3 projects. The Nkota project is one of them. In this particular transaction, we were supporting, at the time, Responsibility, who are now Serengeti Energy. The project is under construction. It's about 21 megawatts, and the RLSF cover we provided is about $2.4 million. Now, when you look back to the previous comments I shared, that $2.4 million covers about 3 to 4 months worth of revenue for the IPP. But by making it available, we're able to unlock up to $28 million in total project financing. And therein, you can see the value add of these little liquidity instruments and the total impact they can make in ensuring that cleaner projects are connected to the grid on the African continent. At the bottom of your screen, you can better appreciate the impact in terms of the jobs created, the CO2 emissions avoided, as well as the number of people that will have access to electricity across the African continent. Under phase 2 of RLSF, we've made some changes, and we are hopeful that going forward, these are the kind of instruments that can be of benefit to various Japanese investors and indeed to our partners from the Japanese government who can come on board by providing additional funding to help enhance these initiatives and make sure that they are responsive and have the impact that is intended for them to have. Going forward, beyond what we've been able to do with RLSF and the success we've had early on, we are looking to make some changes to ensure that it continues to be responsive and that we can provide solutions for other forms that provide or allow for people to have access to energy. Most times we focus almost exclusively on electricity, but there could be a need for solutions that allow for home cooking solutions, to be more accessible, to be more cost-friendly. And if we can find solutions or guarantee instruments that can aid in that process, we'll be happy to explore that alongside our various partners. I hope you can see the screen. I know it's a lot of content on that particular African map, but it's a good summary of where we are as ATI. The countries in green and orange are ATI member countries as of today. Those in orange are the 8 member countries that have signed the RLSF MOU. So on the far left, you have Cote d'Ivoire, all the way to the far right where you have Madagascar. The other countries in green are still members of ATI, but they are yet to sign the MOU. So we cannot look at RLSF within those markets, but we'll certainly be happy to explore PRI cover or any form of cover that can be of benefit to various investors within those markets. The points in blue are indications of some of the transactions we've supported. So you've got projects such as the Nyamwamba project in Uganda. We've been part of projects such as the Lake Turkana project in Kenya. In Burundi, we're part of the very first solar IPP, Gigawatt Global, and we are hoping to have a similar impact in Benin and in Zambia when ongoing tender processes within those 2 markets are concluded. The last initiative that we have is the transparency tool. One of the biggest challenges when investing in grid-connected projects on the African continent, which is partly the reason why we set up RLSF, is a concern about whether or not you'll be paid on time. And such information is currently not available. By setting up the transparency tool, we hope to collect information from operational IPPs within ATI member countries, and from time to time to publish such reports externally. We've done that already in Malawi, where we're able to demonstrate that the utility within that market, ESCOM, at the time was honoring its payment obligations to operational IPPs in a timely manner. If we can do that across our 20 member countries, if over time we can do that across the 54 African states, it will ensure that there's an alignment between the perception of whether or not utilities pay and the reality, which in truth is that they do pay, albeit in some markets, there will be some delays. I've come to my last slide, and this is a challenge to everyone who's attending, the various opportunities that are there for investors. One is that you can benefit from ATI's understanding of the African market. We've been working in Africa for the last 21 years. We've been providing guarantees to power and renewable energy projects for most of that time. So we have a very good understanding of market trends, market challenges, and how to structure solutions in a manner that can be impactful. Another opportunity is that investors and lenders can benefit both from the PRI and the RLSF cover that we provide. And lastly, when you are looking to enter into a market that may be new to a Japanese investor or an American investor, you might not fully understand where the challenges might lie and how to structure solutions for those challenges. Of course, ATI can be your partner in helping you understand those market gaps within those particular jurisdictions. The last one, I think my colleagues from NEXI and from the government have indicated that there's ongoing growing cooperation between ATI and the Japanese government. And we hope over time that can extend to some of the initiatives we presented here today, either via funding being provided or via technical assistance being provided, or in some cases, joint cooperation to ensure that these instruments are better understood by potential investors, and that if there are ways we can improve upon them, we'll be happy to hear from the various stakeholders and ensure that we as ATI continue to make the impact that we are well known for making on the African continent. So thank you so much, Annabelle.
Annabelle, please proceed.
And as Annabelle rejoins, I'll be happy to address any questions at the very end of the session. So please feel free to type them out in the chat box. If at all there isn't enough time, we'd be happy to address the questions via mail following the event.
Thank you, Obi. I see that Annabelle has lost signal and she has dropped off. There are some comments available if you'd like to read the questions on the right-hand side. In the comments.
Sure, Jackie. I can take the lead, I think, as Annabelle rejoins, and then my colleagues Akiyama and I can try to respond to them. So I think
Perfect,
the first
thank
one,
you.
Akiyama, is addressed to you. It's how can Nexi mobilize various investors into finance for green growth?
Yes, thank you for your question. Okay, as one of our various insurance cover for infrastructure fund or trustee could be one of the solutions to invite the various investors. From the, for example, administrative perspective, participating as investor through fund structure is easier for them. And we have some track record in Africa using the fund structure. And also, we successfully invited the several institutional investors from Japan.
Sure. Thank you so much, Akiyama. The second question that came through was, what do you think is the biggest impediment to allow further investment in green growth projects on the African continent? And perhaps I can take that particular question. I think the biggest challenge, of course, is one of political risk, mainly driven by perceptions by investors and lenders going into some of these countries. So the perceptions obviously need to be corrected, for lack of a better word, but better informed. The other one is, in most African countries, there's a lack of information, a lack of transparency. So most investors lack an understanding or lack access to the right information for them to make informed decisions. Now, what tends to happen is that if a party or a stakeholders is not well informed, they'll look to price that into their risk assessment. And by doing so, you make transactions more expensive, you make projects more expensive, and overall, you then create a challenge in that more and more projects cannot attain financial close, and very few projects then go into project construction. So I think the lack of information and the lack of transparency usually is quite a big challenge. The next question that I can maybe share with Akiyama, and thanks, Annabelle is back on the call. How can Nexi and ATI collaborate to finance for green growth? Perhaps I'll go first, and then Akiyama, you can take the lead there. I think the first way is collaboration. As we've seen, Nexi is having already a huge impact on the African continent, and ATI is doing the same, but we are doing this in separate spaces. And I think by collaborating, sharing more information, we can certainly allow for more financing of green growth. But Akiyama, perhaps you can add on that, and then I'll hand over back to Annabelle.
Yes, thank you very much. For ideas and several schemes such as co-insurance or reinsurance scheme can be considered. Reinsurance scheme is one of the area of expertise as an insurance company, but co-finance as risk sharing between ATI and Nexi, I think, is an interesting approach. Thank you.
Thank you to you both, and apologies for this little trouble, connectivity issues. But yeah, it was quite very interesting. Thank you for taking over and responding to these questions. It's obvious, I mean, that climate change is real, and the need to promote green growth and greener economies by managing natural assets efficiently and sustainably, including enhancing agricultural productivity and promoting sustainable infrastructure, is clear. I mean, the will and the imperative to reach net zero carbon emission by 2050 is there, and this maybe is a question that I'll address to you, Obi. What do you think is the biggest impediment to allow further investments in green energy projects on the African continent?
Sure, thanks, Annabelle. So I think we had touched in part on that particular one, but just to emphasize the point, I think one of the biggest challenges is the fact that there's a perception of certain political risk across the African continent. And as risk mitigation providers, as guarantors, as lenders that are better informed, I think we have to do a bit more to address some of those perceptions. True, there are some countries that political risk is a bit higher, but across most of the continent, I think there's a mismatch between the perception and the true risk on the ground. The second one is a lack of information, a lack of transparency. And once we can address that via the various publications, the various reports, and to show that investments in green growth do actually work, they do actually yield a good return for the investors, and for the most part, they perform as anticipated. If we can share more of that information, I think more investors will be encouraged to participate. And those 2 points, I believe, are probably areas that can be improved upon to encourage more investments in green growth.
Interesting. Thank you very much. We are also receiving a few questions from our audience today. One here addressed to both of you. Maybe we'll start with you, Mr. Akiyama. The question is, how does ATI and NEXI overcome the challenge in providing support for offtake agreements in local currencies?
Yes, thank you very much for your question, Annabelle. This is one of our challenging issues, which I can see in the several transactions. It's some solutions there. For example, during the negotiation stage, we can negotiate with the off-takers and also the related parties, how we can accommodate these issues. For example, some mitigations, or in a cash flow model, we can approach to these issues. Of course, in Africa, this is very huge issues, but also we can provide cover in such a challenging offtake agreement.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Akiyama. Obi, do you want to respond as well to that from ATI's perspective?
Sure. I think we're quite aligned. Perhaps the one thing I would add is that for ATI or NEXI to support local currency agreements in such structures, it's important that the currency of the funding matches the currency of the agreements. And that's something that we're looking to do already in our partnership with utilities and regulators on the African continent, to ensure that we can get to a point where you have bankable local currency agreements to start with. Because if the agreement, be it a power purchase agreement, is in euros or dollars with reference to a particular exchange rate, you'll still have that mismatch, and it might be very challenging to address that exclusively on the financing side. So I think we have to do some work to make sure that we can get to a point where you have local currency denominated agreements, and thereafter you have local currency financing agreements following that. So that's the only point that I would add. But generally, we're quite aligned with the views shared by Mr. Akiyama.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Obi. In the interest of time, we'll just take one last question here, a quick one. Well, if the overseas lender is providing the loan, the financing in hard currency or Japanese yen, which party will be borne by the hedging costs? Where are the hedging costs? Is this one you'd want to answer, Mr. Akiyama?
Yes, this is, we can cover the hard currency based the finance by our insurance, but hedging cost, it's a difficult one. We now offering the an interesting hedge, the insurance project program, but the currency we don't have so far any solution in our insurance program.
Great. Thank you both very much. Again, a big thank you to our panelists, Mr. Ki Kawahara, Mr. Yoji Akiyama, and Mr. Obi Banda for their presentations and their explanations. And also thank you to our audience as well for making this session interactive. So this concludes our first session. If you have any follow-up questions for NEXI or ATI, we will share contacts, email addresses after the webinar. So again, thank you to you all. So we will now move to part 2 of this webinar under the theme ATI NEXI, Cooperation for Supporting Japanese Investment in Africa. As some of you know, in 2019 at TICAD 7 in Yokohama, NEXI and ATI established a cooperation framework to provide greater levels of risk mitigation to Japanese companies and financiers doing business in Africa. So Japanese desk was set up within ATI as a result, which I'm actually very proud to be a part of. So 3 years later, where are we? What has come out of it? What are NEXI and ATI solutions to unlock more Japanese investments in Africa? So Mr. Yuichiro Akita from NEXI and Reni Kariuki from ATI will tell us more about it. We will then hear from an active investor on the continent, Sumitomo Corporation, about their investment experience in Africa, with a focus on the landmark transaction investment in the telecom sector in Ethiopia. As ever, during their presentation, please feel free to use the chat box to ask questions, which they will respond at the end during our Q&A sessions. So, Mr. Yuchuhiro, hello again, and thank you for telling us more about Nexi's experience supporting Japanese investments in Africa. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. Okay, so I'd like to introduce about our investment insurance program. So next page, please. Okay, Nexi is an export credit agency, which is wholly owned by the Japanese government. Although we call ourselves as an ECA, we provide not only export credit, but also investment insurance. In addition, we also have loan insurance program to support Japanese cross-border financing, which just Mr. Akiyama explained. Among these products, today I will introduce our investment insurance program. In this presentation, I also highlight our unique characteristics and strength as a government agency. So if our clients face difficult situation with the project host country government, we often work and go through the difficult times along with our clients. To do this, we closely work with our government and the embassies to obtain their assistance and political and diplomatic backing. Next, please. So how it works. Under the insurance, we cover the insured losses incurred by discontinued operation of the overseas affiliated company due to the country risks such as war and expropriation. As you can see, Nexi's investment insurance program is a political risk insurance, not credit risk insurance. We provide our cover for Japanese equity investment as well as the shareholders' loan. The slide shows the covered risks under the program. The insured can choose either comprehensive or selected risks cover. Regarding the breach of contract cover, this is provided on request basis, and after a due diligence on the host government's payment obligations, we will underwrite with special conditions. According to the latest JETRO survey to Japanese affiliated companies in Africa, nearly half of the companies responded to expand their business in Africa in next 2 years. They have high expectation of growth potential in the region. In the same survey, over 60% of respondents recognized establishment or application of regulatory framework as risk of investment towards Africa, and followed by 50% respondents stating political and social instability as risk. We believe that Nexi's investment insurance would be one of the tools for the Japanese investors to mitigate these risks. Next, please. So let us introduce our recent underwriting experiences of investment insurance for Africa. Overall, we have had strong demand from our clients. Since Ticket 7 held in 2019, the outstanding commitment as of this August has increased by 31%. Some of the large transactions were shown on the slide. The sector ranges from food and agriculture to infrastructure, telecommunication, energy, and natural resource development. Although you will see names of active and renowned Japanese trading houses and large corporate, one thing which I would like to mention here is Nexi can provide our investment insurance irrespective of the size of business. Nexi is cooperating with Japanese non-life private insurance companies such as Tokyo Marine Nichido to provide our investment insurance for small businesses in Japan. The slides also highlights our experiences to collaborate with multilateral agencies such as ATI and MIGA. Multilaterals have strong negotiation power against the host government. So if a transaction is structured in co-insurance or reinsurance with multilaterals, Japanese investors will also have a great comfort. Next, please. So why not choose Nexi Investment Insurance? Under our investment insurance, you can protect your investment from political risk in Africa. NEXI could work along with our clients through the challenging time when political risks arise or rising. NEXI, as a government agency, will be assisted by our government and or embassy. In case that NEXI collaborated with our multilateral partners such as ATI, our clients may also have extra comfort to deal with difficult issues. In this sense, ATI will be a very important partner for Japanese companies. So we are looking forward to working with you to support Japanese investment in Africa as well as private sector development in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yuchiro. I mean, I see that Nexi has a strong and healthy pipeline of deals. So it goes to show again how active and present Japanese investors are on the continent now, which I think is quite encouraging. So without any transition, please allow me to introduce Reni Kariuki, who is currently a senior underwriter at ATI. She's a seasoned senior finance and insurance professional with banking, credit, and political risk underwriting expertise. She has continuously developed and rolled out political and credit risk insurance products and corporate and SME finance solutions across Africa, with the purpose of promoting economic growth on the continent. Reni's work engagement has led to frequent interactions with African government officials, international investors, and local and international board of directors. She is known for her solid marketing background and influencing skills, and she has engaged with multidisciplinary units at ATI in profitability management by originating business and developing standards, improving processes, and building external relationships, while specializing increasingly in the management of complex, multifunctional financial projects in multiple countries in Africa. So Reni will now tell us more about ATI and its solutions to facilitate trade and investments on the continent. So good afternoon, Reni, and thank you for being here. Over to you.
Thank you, Annabelle. Happy to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who's on this webinar. My colleague Obi Banda gave a brief introduction who Africa Trade Insurance is and what our products are. So allow me to give a bit of a deeper dive on the same. So I'll take you through who ATI is, what our products are, and I'll also give you a brief summary of some of the transactions we partnered with in the past with Japanese investors and Japanese traders. So as Obi mentioned previously, ATI is Africa's multilateral guarantee institution and one of Africa's largest DFIs in terms of portfolio size. Now, ATI is quite strong and robust in its makeup. We are currently rated A stable by Standard & Poor's and A3 stable by Moody's. In addition to that, ATI mandate is to promote trade and development in Africa. We are here to promote African economic growth of our member countries. We are currently owned by African states, all of whom are AU member states, and currently there are 20 in total, as Obi previously mentioned. In addition to that, we have various shareholding into ATI. We also have shareholders of countries which are non-African, for example, Italy and India. We also are owned by private corporations, regional international institutions. Currently, we have offices in 6 African countries, though we are headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya. Now, we have been promoting trade and investment in Africa, cross-border trade, supporting foreign investors to invest in Africa since the year 2001. And our mandate, as I mentioned earlier, is to promote economic growth of our member states. Currently, we are pleased to confirm that we've supported an average of between 1% and 2% of GDP in our member countries on an annual basis. We've sent a document called a PCS, that's a preferred creditor status with our member countries, which is a very important document in our line of business. Basically, our PCS says that in case we are to incur a loss because of any actions or inactions of any of our member states, we're able to recover this loss through deducting from the capital contribution. Now, this document that we've signed with these member states is very useful as we embark on supporting transactions in the African continent. Now, we will, next slide, please. Through the next slides, we'll discuss what kind of risks Japanese investors and traders look at in terms of investing in the African continent. And then we look at ATI's products which address these risks. So from our past interactions with African investors and traders, they've informed us of the risks that they're concerned about in the African continent, such as the risk of default by sovereign governments or default on sovereign obligations. This is sometimes it's based on perception, sometimes it's a real risk, but it's some of the concerns foreign Japanese investors have with the African countries. We also have risks such as revocation of concessions, especially from prior governments. You get into an agreement with an existing government, then come a few years later, we have general elections in the African country, we have a new government in place, and you're concerned that the new government will not honor the previous contracts you had with the previous government. That's a real risk, and you are able to insure you against that risk. Other risks include inability to convert or transfer local currency to hard currency and expropriate it out of the country, out of the African country. We also have contract restriction due to inadequate legal and regulatory framework in some of our African countries. We also have the regulatory risk, which involves cancellation of concessions, withdrawal of licenses, and economic tariffs, and competing political interests. All these are real risks faced by not only African countries, but other countries in the world as well. But for ATI, we focus on the African countries. We also have confiscation risk, expropriation, nationalization, deprivation, which is a risk experienced or faced by most Japanese investors coming to the African continent, and forced abandonment. Now, next slide, please. Now, those risks I've mentioned are quite detailed, but they're not conclusive. But in addressing those risks and those concerns, we've been able to come up with products at ATI, which are able to address those risks. Now, ATI has two main products. That's the political or investment risk insurance cover, or the commercial or credit risk insurance cover. Now, the performance risk cover normally falls under the commercial or credit risk insurance covers. Under the political or investment risk insurance cover, this involves actions or inactions of the African governments. Under this cover, we have a number of risks that we insure, starting with non-honoring of sovereign or sub-sovereign obligations or debts. In this case, you get into an agreement or a contract with a government or government institution, and you're concerned about the risk of them not honoring that obligation. We also have confiscation, expropriation, and nationalization of the investments you've put up in African countries, arbitration award default, currency convertibility or transfer restriction. You invest your hard currency into the African member state, generate income in local currency, and then unable to convert this local currency into hard currency and expropriate it back to your country. That's a real risk, and we are providing that insurance cover at ATI currently. We also insure against loss of investment or income due to war, civil war, and terrorism. All these risks fall under the political or investment risk cover, and we're able to insure against these risks. Other than that, we have the commercial risk of the credit risk insurance cover, which normally involves private companies trading amongst each other. We have Japanese exporters exporting to buyers in the African continent, and they're concerned about ability to get payment for their products and services supplied to the African counterparty. So under this cover, we normally insure against insolvency of the African company, non-payment or delayed payments by the African company, or just refusal to pay by the African company. We understand and appreciate the fact that the Japanese exporter is very far away from Africa. They have sometimes maybe they've never met the African counterparty. So they're able to count on ATI to either approach this company since we are on the ground in Africa, or to be able to put pressure through our own systems, our own network in Africa, to be able to help you recover on your monies, or to be able to compensate you in case of insolvency. Rather than that, we also able to support Japanese companies or investors who have contracts in Africa. We're able to support you as you seek, when you look for bid bonds, performance bonds, advance payment bonds, we're able to support you on that kind of risk. Next slide, please. We have in the past worked with various companies, both international and local. On this list, we listed some of the international partners and clients we've worked with in the past around the world. And the ones highlighted in orange are the Japanese companies we've worked with in the past and continue working with to date. To name them, we have Marubeni, we have NEC, we have Sumitomo, we have Toshiba, Tota Shushu. On the international financiers, we have Mizuhi Bank, MUFG, SMBC. We are also very honored to partner with Nexi. We continue to work with them. We worked with them in the past, and we look forward to a very fruitful future partnership with Nexi in support of African Japanese investors and companies. Next slide, please. So allow me to quote some of the statements that have been communicated by some of the partners we've worked with in the past. This statement is from Mr. Atsuo Kuroda, the chairman and CEO of Nexi. He said that Nexi will continue to work closely with ATI to develop an environment that will encourage Japanese companies to make trade investment to Africa. In addition to what Mr. Kuroda said, we also have comments from Mr. Christopher Marks, who's the head of emerging markets at MUFG. His comment is that it is fantastic that we are now able to utilize ATA to support our clients and businesses in Africa, particularly when handling trade flow and investment. Mr. Tesoro Imaeda, Managing Executive Officer and Head of EMEA Division at SMBC, has also added to those comments and said by signing this MOU between one of our most important partners in Africa, that is ATI, SMBC will be able to support our clients' business to Africa through a wide range of coverage of ATI in the continent and expects to further strengthen the existing strong relationship. Those are the comments we've had in the past from our Japanese partners, and we concur with these comments and look forward to continue working with them. Next slide, please. Allow me to take you through quite a few transactions we've partnered with in the past with Japanese investors and companies. These are some of them, not all of them, but we are willing to continue working with Japanese investors and companies to support trade in Africa and also support Japanese business into Africa. So the first transaction involves a Japanese bank, one of the main banks in Japan. It was a lead arranger in a loan to support a West African country finance new infrastructure in the country, as well as reprofile the existing short-term and very expensive debt for the country. And with partnership with the Japanese bank, we're able to support a longer-term hard currency debt, which freed up cash flows for the country, which they're able to reinvest in other priority areas in the country. ATI's role in this transaction was to provide a guarantee, an insurance policy against the risk of sovereign default. The loan amount in this case that we're supporting was 230 million euros. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned by my colleague Obi, we are very active in the renewable energy space, and we are very supportive of green energy in Africa and around the world. And in so doing, we've been able to support Africa's largest wind farm project, which is the Electricana Wind Power Project, based in Nairobi, Kenya. Not Nairobi, but it's based in Kenya. Now, under this project, we're able to support many equipment suppliers from Japan to supply equipment to support this project, and we're able to provide a breach of contract insurance cover. Total project cost for this particular wind farm project was $660 million US. Next slide, please. Other than that, we continuously support many Japanese exporters and traders who are exporting products into the African continent. And to date, we've been able to support many Japanese telecommunication equipment providers into the African countries, currently valued at $25 million. Not only in the telecommunication equipment space, we also support mobile phone companies. We also support any motor vehicle companies, any traders who have contracts with African companies. We are able to support you as you bring in your products into the African continent and deal with African countries. Next slide, please. Now, one of the most recent transactions we have been able to support as ATI in partnership with Nexi is providing foreign direct investment insurance cover to one of the Japanese companies who was investing in Ethiopia's telecommunication industry following liberalization of the telecom sector in Ethiopia. We're able to bind this transaction this year, and we're very proud of this transaction and our partnership with Nexi and Japanese government. Now we're able to provide a foreign direct investment insurance cover to the Japanese company, ensuring that they will not incur any losses as they seek to invest in the telecom sector in Ethiopia. Transaction value to date is $502 million US. So that is the end of my presentation, but allow me to conclude that by saying that we are very honored and pleased to partner with various Japanese companies and Japanese investors, and we look forward to a very fruitful future partnership as we work together between Japan and Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rennie, for this insightful presentation. We are now a bit behind schedule, so in the interest of time, we will move directly to our last presenter and panelist of this webinar, Mr. Kushiya and Mr. Ono. Yoshio Kushiya is the General Manager of Smart Infrastructure Business Department of Sumitomo Corporation. He joined Sumitomo Corporation in 1992 and continuously worked for ICT sector. Now he's responsible for the telecom project in Ethiopia and business development in mobile and digital infrastructure business in global markets. Mr. Kushiya's colleague, Mr. Kenta Ono, who will participate in the Q&A session, is the Manager for International Economic Cooperation and Public-Private Partnership Promotion Department at Sumitomo Corporation. So Mr. Kushiya and Mr. Ono have kindly agreed to participate in this webinar to give us the investor's perspective. In their presentation, they will showcase what their investment experience on the continent has been like, particularly on a notable landmark transaction that Rennie mentioned in the Ethiopian telecom sector following the sector liberalization. This project also demonstrates how the strategic collaboration between ATI and Nexi brought this transaction to financial close. So, Mr. Kushiya, thank you for participating in this webinar. We look forward to learning more from your presentation. The floor is yours now.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for introduction, Annabelle-san. Also, thank you very much for ATI and the Next team to give us this opportunity. My name is Kushiya from Sumitomo. As introduced just now, let me briefly talk about our first telecom project in Africa, which is greatly supported by ATI and Nexi. Next page, please. These are agenda for today. I'm talking about firstly about our company and our expertise, African and telecom, and lastly, I will explain about the project in Ethiopia. Yes, please. Next, please. Yeah, firstly, I would like to explain who we are. Next, please. Sumitomo Corporation was founded in 1919. We are a global trading and investment company and are known as Sogo Shosha in Japanese. We have 131 offices worldwide, and 11 out of which are located in the African region. The number of our consolidated subsidiaries and associated companies are close to 900, and the number of employees are 75,000 as consolidated basis. As next, please. Sumitomo Group conduct business activities in a wide range of industries, including metal products, transportation, mineral resources, infrastructure, food, and media telecommunications on global scale. The 6 business units and 1 initiative, as shown in this slide, are working closely together with regional organizations all over the world. Strategically and organically integrating our robust business foundation, our diverse high-level functions, we create new values by staying a step ahead in dealing with changes and transcending existing framework to solve social issues. Next, please. Then let me touch on our experience in African and telecom. Next, please. As briefly mentioned in my previous slide, and as you see in this left side of this slide, Sumitomo Corporation has 11 offices in Africa. We aim at contributing to enriching the lives of Africa through many kinds of business investment. Other than digital infrastructure, digital transformation, which is main agenda for today's presentation, We have committed to sustainable energy and power supply through the business in mineral resources and power infrastructure sectors. For example, as you see in the right side of this slide, we have big investment projects such as Ambatobe nickel cobalt refinery project in Madagascar, Dopa wind farm IPP project in South Africa, and Capon combined cycle power plant IPP project in Ghana. Next, please. Next, I would like to explain the history of our telecommunication business. In 1995, we firstly invested in Mobicom in Mongolia. And since then, we have developed our business mainly in emerging countries such as India, Russia, and Myanmar. In Myanmar, in particular, as a foreign partner of MPT, which was a state-owned telephone company, we have been operating our businesses together with a major Japanese telecommunication company. Next, please. Then let me go to the project in Ethiopia. Next, please. With the strong partnership with Safaricom, Vodafone, and British International Investment, we got a new telecommunications business license in Ethiopia and started the preparatory work for operation last year. We are currently working hard with massive support from Ethiopian government for the launch of the services. We are expecting to start partial operation shortly and the services to be available in 25 cities across country by April next year. We will provide high quality and stable telecommunications infrastructure to serve as a lifeline for the people of Ethiopia. The picture at the bottom shows our image of future development with the project. First, we will provide stable telecommunications services to more customers based on infrastructure. And on top of that, we are planning to develop mobile money service, which are indispensable for economic activities. And based on this platform, we as a Sumitomo aim to think about the various business cases which would solve social issues such as agriculture, healthcare, education, and microfinance, etc. Next page, please. It is indisputable that there are significant opportunities in Ethiopia for us, but on the other hand, we also recognize that there are certain risks associated with our investments. What we have identified are political and regulatory risk, currency and foreign exchange risk, security on the infrastructure, and so on. When we investigated our telecom project, these are the big challenge, how to mitigate the risk in order to decide the investment. But to overcome that situation, we had consulted with ATI and NEXI how to they can support us. After long discussion with the negotiation, we could finally come to the conclusion of the political risk insurance contract with ATI, which is reinsured by NEXI. Thank you very much for everybody's effort from ATI and NEXI. This is really a critical role for Sumitomo, and with the insurance support from NEXI, and we will continue our committed investment in Ethiopia to enrich the lives and the world. Yes, next page, please. Maybe this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Koshiya. It's quite an impressive investment in Ethiopia, really. We know that, the Ethiopian government through Ethio Telecom has always maintained a monopoly over all telecommunication services in Ethiopia. The fact that you now penetrate this market is quite impressive. So thank you very much for your presentation. I will now invite Mr. Ono, Mr. Akita, yourself, Mr. Kushia, and Mrs. Karyuki on our virtual podium for a live Q&A session. To our audience, please don't forget that you can ask questions to our panelists by using the chat box on your right. So let's just dive into it with the first question. This one goes to Sumitomo, Mr. Kushia, or Mr. Ono. This first question actually is quite interesting, I find, because from where we sit on the continent, we sometimes feel that the risks foreign investors associate with the continent are perceived and not real. So it would be interesting to know from your standpoint, when it comes to doing business in Africa, what are the risks and the opportunities that you see?
Maybe, okay, Odo-san, maybe you can answer to the question.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us such questions, Annabella-san. My name is Ono. I'm from Sumitomo Corporation. As a person who is involved in overall activities of Sumitomo Corporation in Africa, I'd like to comment on that for that question. Without doubt, Africa is the continent full of potential for private companies. But right now, from the viewpoint of private companies, spread of corona infection and war in Ukraine have negatively affected macroeconomic situation of many African countries. Category deterioration of DSA, debt sustainability analysis, clearly indicates difficulties of African economy and finance. And of course, it has critical impacts on private investment business. So we private companies have to care more about risks such as political risk and exchange and the payment risk, as Mr. Kushia indicated in his presentation. So for overcoming this situation, collaboration with international and government organizations becomes crucially important for promoting private business in Africa. That is our view. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ono. Very interesting. So in essence, you see that there's an important for you to invest on the continent with PRI cover, right? It's quite essential for a company such as Sumitomo. Yeah. Interesting. Thank you very much. Our second question now will go to Nexi, Mr. Yuchiro. What do you see is the significance of collaboration between ATI and Nexi?
Right. Thank you very much, Annabelle. So in my presentation, I explained the ATI-Nexi collaboration strengthen investors' protection from political risk. In addition, this collaboration also expands risk underwriting capacity for both ATI and Nexi. For Nexi point of view, ATI's intelligence or knowledge and experience in the region helps our underwriting decision. We may be able to underwrite risks which we could not have underwrite by Nexi by ourselves. So this is a very important element for us to work with ATI. Maybe for ATI point of view, Nexi also can provide additional underwriting capacity as well as Japanese companies' network to ATI, so Japan desk. So in nutshell, ATI-Nexi collaboration will create those good synergies, both of us, and a win-win for both agencies. So, and ultimately, this is good for Japanese companies and also good for African companies as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Rennie, would you like to comment as well on the same question as, what do you see as the significance of collaboration between ATI and Nexi?
Yes, I completely agree with Akita-san in terms of ATI and Nexi collaboration. We are able to support a large amount of capacity with Nexi support. We are also able to, since we are on the ground, we are able to give comfort to Nexi and the Japanese investors and companies in terms of African risk. In addition to that, we also rely on Nexi in terms of knowledge of their clients, the Japanese companies and the investors. Nexi has worked closely with them, so we rely on them to give us feedback on who we're actually dealing with in the Japanese in Japan in terms of the investors and the companies. In addition to that, we share knowledge. We share knowledge with Nexi in terms of what are we doing in Africa, what do we see in Africa, how our economy is working, how is the situation on the ground. For example, in Kenya, we have our general elections going on. We are able to give feedback in terms of the situation on the ground, since we are based in Africa. Likewise, for Nexi, they're able to give us situation on the ground on their continent and what is happening in their continent. So it's a very beneficial and fruitful relationship we have with Nexi.
Thank you very much, Rennie. And well, building up on that, and I know we touched, upon how the Japanese desk came about, but could you give us an introduction to the audience about the ATI Japanese desk and what it entails?
All right, so the ATI's Japan desk was established following TICAD 7, which was a couple of years back. Now, the purpose for ATI's Japan desk is basically to work to promote Japanese investment and trade into Africa. We also give Japanese investors and companies, and as well as partners like Nexi, feedback on what is happening in our continent and what's happening with their transactions in our continent. So we are a go-between. We are the face of Africa for Japan, Japanese companies, Nexi partners. We are the face of Africa through which we are able to support their transactions.
Thank you very much, Rennie. Now, maybe this is a question that I can address to you all. We can start maybe with the investors, Sumitomo, Mr. Kushiya, or Mr. Ono. What do you expect to see, going forward in this ATI and Nexi collaboration? Obviously, we'll be strengthening it. But what do you see from your standpoint as an investors on the continent? What products would you like to see? What more instruments would you like to see? And what do you expect from this collaboration between those two institutions?
Yes, I'm commenting for that question. Generally speaking, as I explained, we have to care more about political and economic risks, such as exchange and payment risks, for promoting investment business in Africa, especially after Corona expansion. So we appreciate proactive and risk-taking support of Nexi and ATI, and with other DFIs and ECAs for minimizing risks of private companies and facilitating investment. And in addition, as a fundamental issue, a macroeconomic improvement and stability of African countries is really mandatory for further promotion of private investment in Africa. So we hope not only through trade insurance, trade and investment insurance, but Nexi and ATI to work on for macroeconomic improvement of Africa by facilitating the collaboration with other international and government organizations. That would be really necessary for further investment of the private companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ono, and we're all taking notes right now. Thank you very much. Mr. Ojichiro, would you like to as well comment on this question as to what can be expected?
Sure. I think our relationship between ATI and Nexi has just started, and we will develop more, deepen our relationship under the various level of organization. Of course, management level, and as well as the underwriters level as well. If possible, and if time allows, we like to, work together in some way for common transactions. Not only those kind of things, but also to understand the risks of the region. And so the wider range of cooperation will be expected, and I think we can do more better service for Japanese companies in the near future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. And the last comment from you, Rennie, as to what the future holds in this next ATI collaboration.
Yes, I agree with Mr. Akita-san. It's just the beginning. We have a great future ahead. We also have, we're able to reach out to Japanese companies based in Africa, saying that we collaborate with Nexi because they're all aware who Nexi is. It makes it easier for them to trust what we have to say and trust the partnership because Nexi is we're partnering with Nexi with the transactions in Africa.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Rennie. And now our last question for you, Akita-san. This one is addressed to you from our audience. Could you please elaborate the main events covered in the new ad of natural risks under your PRI, which, by the way, we do not cover at ATI, so it'd be interesting as well to know what you're covering under these perils.
Right. I think this in Mr. Kawahara's presentation, he explained about that matter. But talking about particularly the investment insurance, this element has already had under our insurance policy. So I explained the measure of our investment insurance covers the area is the political risk, but also traditionally we are also covering the force majeure, including natural disasters, those kind of things. So I think this is clearly one of the points which Japanese clients are also can enjoy from our insurance policy. Those kind of part is we try to expand not only for investment insurance, but also export credit insurance, particularly in the short-term area. There are some disturbances due to the COVID-19 supply chain disturbances. Due to that, it takes a little bit difficult situation for exporters to collect receivables. So we try to cover those potential losses through our new, based on the new legislation and also product improvement. The many Japanese exporters can also benefit from those our new extended cover under the export credit insurance, particularly for short term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akita-san. Thank you very much. It's quite an innovative product, so it's very good to see that Nexi is, such an innovative, ECA. So thank you very much, and thank you to all our panelists for these very interesting and interactive discussions. I think we've covered a lot, and I do hope that our audience also have learned a lot in the process. So this now marks the end of our second session. Thank you very much to all our panelists.
Thank you very much.
Akita-san, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Akita-san, before we end this webinar, we'll now invite you to give your concluding remarks.
All right, thank you very much. So since Ticket 7 held in Yokohama in 2019, partnership between ATI and Nexi has been steadily developed. In 2020, we had joint workshop in Tokyo with ATI. Then ATI established Japan Desk, where the contact point for Japanese companies at ATI. ATI and Nexi also collaborated to develop Japanese site in ATI homepage. And finally, this year, ATI teams and Nexi underwriters successfully concluded the first transaction, Sumitomo Corporation's telecom project in Ethiopia. We would like to serve Japanese companies more effectively for Japanese investment in Africa and supporting green growth in the region. Both Nexi and ATI are very much looking forward to listening your voices, even at very early stage of your project development. And we would like to work closely with our clients to find solutions if you face any challenges. So please feel free to contact Nexi underwriters and ATI Japan desk if you seek any risk mitigation tools in your business. Our collaboration will continue, and after TCAD 8, our partnership will be further strengthened. We will be able to introduce good news right after TCAD 8, so stay tuned. Once again, thank you very much for joining us today, and the final words from Annabelle, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Akita-san. I mean, I totally agree with you. As you clearly mentioned, from Algeria to Zimbabwe, from Dakar to Djibouti, Africa today needs to attract more private investors who can join forces with local partners in order to create added value and initiate inclusive and sustainable growth. So in this context, the continent needs much more investment from Japan. And as we've seen from our speaker, as we've heard from our speaker, Nexi and ATI are ready to support this. And this is why we've joined forces by launching the Japanese desk in 2019. So 3 years after TCAD 7, we can clearly attest that the ATI Nexi collaboration is well alive and is fruitful. And the promises made during TCAD 7 were not empty. The partnership has delivered, and we hope it will continue to deliver over the next coming years by enhancing and strengthening our partnership. Also, now just wear my underwriter hat here to our African exporters as well, who may be on this call and who are looking at Japan as a market destination. Please reach out to ATI as well. Our role is to facilitate trades and investments in and out of Africa. So we also have tailored solutions for you. So do contact us. So to all our audience present on this call, thank you very much for joining in. Before you leave this webinar, please fill out our quick survey to tell us how it did. We definitely want to hear from you on how we can do better next time. Please do tell us if you have found the discussions interesting and the content you would like us to dwell on next time. It will serve us, it will help us serve you better all next time. So this now marks the end of this webinar. This webinar was recorded, so you will receive all a link of the recording via email, as well as our contact details if you have any follow-up questions. So to all of you again, thank you very much for listening in. Asante sana, arigato.
Thank you. Arigato.